Have you ever believed that God sends people into our lives for a reason? In the cold forests of Montana, a lonely veteran named Jack thought his days of purpose were over, until one morning he found a crashed helicopter tangled in the trees, and a mysterious woman fighting for her life. What started as a rescue turned into something far greater, a miracle of fate, faith, and love that neither of them saw coming. But who was she really? And why did danger follow her even into the silence of the woods? Stay with us till the end of this story. You'll understand why sometimes the greatest miracles wear human faces. If this story touches your heart, please subscribe, share, and leave a comment to spread hope and faith. May God bless everyone watching today. The early autumn wind swept cold and sharp through the pine forests of western Montana, carrying the scent of rain and distant smoke. The mountains loomed like sleeping giants under a dim gray sky, their peaks veiled in mist. The land here was rough. Rivers ran like veins of silver through the wild, and the mornings bit at the skin. On the edge of this wilderness stood a weathered log cabin, its wooden porch creaking under the weight of years and solitude. Jack Coleman, a man of 55, stepped out with his old thermos of coffee in one hand and a leash in the other. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his frame still carrying the quiet power of a soldier, though softened by time. His face bore the rugged map of a life spent outdoors, deep lines around his eyes, a faint scar beneath his jaw, and a beard peppered with gray. His eyes were a stormy blue, calm yet burdened, reflecting both strength and a weariness born from too many memories. A veteran of the Iraq War, Jack had seen things that never quite left him. The echoes of battle still visited in dreams, though he rarely spoke of it. He preferred silence, the woods, and the company of the only creature he trusted completely, Ranger, his German shepherd. Ranger was 8 years old, a powerful dog with a thick coat of black and tan fur that shimmered slightly in the pale light. His amber eyes were sharp, intelligent, and always alert. He had served alongside Jack as a K-9 unit during his final years in the Army, and though retired now, his loyalty remained fierce. His movements were fluid, disciplined, a soldier's instinct still alive beneath the fur. Jack often said Ranger was the last brother in arms he had left. That morning, the wind was restless, whispering through the trees as the man and his dog began their routine patrol through the forest behind the cabin. The ground was damp, the pine needles slick under their boots and paws. Jack had lived here since his wife passed away nearly a decade ago. He'd built a life of quiet self-sufficiency, hunting, repairing, and keeping to himself. The world beyond the woods had changed too much, and he'd found peace only in isolation. But as he reached the ridge overlooking the valley, something unusual caught his eye. A column of thin smoke rose between the treetops, not far from the clearing where the forest began to thin. His instincts stirred instantly. Smoke meant fire, or worse. With a short whistle, he commanded Ranger to stay close. They moved quietly, their boots crunching on the frost-hardened earth. As they drew closer, the scene unfolded in a way that twisted Jack's stomach. A helicopter hung broken in the upper branches of a massive pine, its tail bent and its rotors mangled. The fuselage was charred, still faintly smoking, and the smell of burned fuel stung the air. He could see through the shattered windshield. No one inside. The pilot's seat was torn, the safety harness cut clean. Not broken, cut. Jack's years of military experience screamed danger. He glanced at Ranger, whose ears were pricked forward, hackles raised slightly. "Easy, boy," Jack murmured, scanning the area. He took out his old radio, the one he used for emergencies, and tried calling for rescue. Static. The signal was too weak in this valley. He cursed under his breath. The mountains had a way of swallowing every cry for help. "All right, we'll have to check the perimeter," he muttered. Ranger barked once softly as if agreeing. They moved through the underbrush, eyes searching for tracks or debris. The wind carried faint embers from the wreckage, and in that eerie quiet, only the sound of the trees creaking broke the silence. Then a sound, faint, fragile, and human. Jack froze. It was a cry, barely audible but real. Ranger's ears twitched, and before Jack could react, the dog took off through the pines. "Ranger!" Jack shouted, breaking into a run. The forest closed around him, branches whipping against his jacket. His breath turned white in the air, his boots pounding against roots and mud. The barking grew louder, urgent. When he finally reached the sound, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, suspended several feet above the ground, tangled in the branches of a tall fir tree, was a parachute. A woman hung from the harness, her body limp, her clothing torn and singed. The white fabric of the chute fluttered weakly in the wind. Blood streaked down her arm, and her pale face was smudged with soot. Jack's training took over. He steadied his breathing, scanned for immediate danger, then began to climb. The bark bit into his palms, the rough surface scraping his skin. But he didn't stop. When he reached her, he saw she was still breathing, shallow but steady. Her features were delicate beneath the grime. Long, dark hair tangled with pine needles, a cut across her temple, lips dry and cracked. She couldn't have been older than 30. "Hang on, ma'am," Jack said, his voice steady. "You're going to be all right." He cut the parachute lines carefully and braced himself as her body slumped against him. She was light, fragile, her pulse fluttering against his wrist like a trapped bird. He climbed down slowly, cradling her weight, until his boots hit solid ground. Ranger circled them, whining softly. Jack laid her on the mossy earth and checked for fractures. Shoulder dislocated, leg bruised but not broken. "Looks like you fell from hell and lived to tell about it," he muttered quietly. He poured a bit of water from his canteen, pressing it gently to her lips. She stirred slightly, murmuring something incoherent before losing consciousness again. Jack looked back toward the wreckage through the trees. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. The cut seatbelt, the helicopter, the parachute. None of it added up. He felt that old sensation, like before a mission, when the silence held secrets. But he pushed the thought aside. First, he had to get her out. He wrapped her in his jacket and lifted her into his arms. Ranger trotted beside him, eyes scanning every direction as they made their way back toward the cabin. The wind had picked up now, carrying with it the distant sound of thunder. The forest seemed to close around them again, dark and ancient. By the time they reached the clearing, the sky had turned the color of iron. Jack laid her on the couch inside his cabin, stoked the fire, and covered her with blankets. Ranger lay down near the door, his eyes fixed on the unconscious stranger. Jack stared into the flames, listening to the wind moaning outside through the pines. Something told him this woman wasn't just another lost traveler. Something about that wreck, those cut straps, and the way she fell from the sky into his life. It all carried the weight of a story far bigger than either of them yet knew. Outside, the storm rolled in, and deep within the forest, the burned helicopter hissed as rain began to fall. The storm that had rolled across the Montana Valley the previous night left the forest glistening under a pale, hesitant sun. The air smelled of wet pine and earth, and faint wisps of fog curled through the trees like ghosts reluctant to leave. Jack Coleman stood on the porch of his cabin, a mug of black coffee in his hand, staring toward the misty woods where he had found the helicopter wreck. His gray-streaked beard was damp with the morning dew, and the tired lines around his eyes deepened as he took a slow sip. Inside, on the worn leather couch near the fire, the mysterious woman he had rescued the day before lay motionless under a wool blanket. Ranger, his loyal German shepherd, rested near her feet, head on his paws, eyes half open but alert. The old dog had sensed something fragile in her, something that required his silent guardianship. Jack turned from the window and set the mug aside, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. The cabin smelled faintly of smoke, cedar, and antiseptic. He crouched beside the woman, adjusting the bandage on her arm. Her face, now clean of soot, revealed delicate features. High cheekbones, fair skin pale from blood loss, and lips slightly cracked. Her long brown hair fanned over the pillow like dark silk, a few strands sticking to her forehead from feverish sweat. Though she seemed barely 30, there was an air of authority in her even in unconsciousness, as if she had once been used to command, not fragility. A soft knock broke the quiet. Jack opened the door to reveal Dr. Sam Whitaker, the local physician from the nearest town of Pine Hollow, some 20 miles away. Sam was in his early 60s, a stocky man with thinning white hair and a weathered face lined from years of mountain air. He wore a faded brown coat, carried a worn leather bag, and smelled faintly of tobacco and peppermint. "You said you found her hanging from a tree?" he asked, voice gravelly but kind. "Yeah," Jack replied, moving aside. "Parachute tangled high up. She's been out cold since." Sam approached the couch, adjusting his glasses. His hands, though rough, were steady as he checked her pulse, lifted her eyelids, and examined the bruises across her arms. "Severe concussion," he muttered. "Possible trauma to the head. She's lucky to be alive. I'd say temporary memory loss is likely." Jack frowned. "So she doesn't even know who she is?" "Not yet," Sam said, packing his tools. "But memories have a strange way of coming back when the heart feels safe. Keep her warm, hydrated, and give her time. I'll send someone from town with some antibiotics." After the doctor left, the cabin fell into the hush of fire crackle and soft breathing. Jack leaned against the wall, folding his arms. He wasn't the type to play caretaker. He'd spent too many years patching wounds on the battlefield, watching lives fade no matter how hard he fought. But something about this woman stirred an instinct he thought long gone. Maybe it was the way Ranger wouldn't leave her side. Maybe it was because she looked so lost, so breakable, that the soldier in him refused to turn away. Hours later, as the afternoon light slanted through the windows, she stirred. A low groan escaped her lips. Her eyes fluttered open, gray-green, deep and confused, and they found Jack standing nearby. For a moment, fear flashed through them, then softened into something else, something fragile. Her lips trembled, and a whisper came out, barely audible. "Dad?" Jack froze, caught off guard. His breath caught somewhere between disbelief and sorrow. "No, you're mistaken," he started. But when he saw her expression, tears trembling at the corners of her eyes, panic rising like a tide, he stopped himself. She was shaking, clutching the blanket to her chest, confusion twisting into terror. "Hey, easy now," he said softly, lowering his voice. "You're safe here. Nobody's gonna hurt you." He sat beside her, hands open, his tone calm like a man soothing a frightened animal. Ranger lifted his head, watching intently, tail thumping once against the floor. She blinked rapidly, struggling to focus. I don't know where I am," she whispered. "I can't remember." Her hand went to the side of her head, wincing. Jack gave a small nod. "You took a bad fall. You're in my cabin, just outside Pine Hollow. I found you yesterday morning." Her eyes moved across the room, the fire, the dog, the rifle hanging on the wall, and then back to him. "You saved me?" "I suppose so," he said, shrugging lightly. "Name's Jack Coleman." She hesitated, frowning as if trying to pull something from the fog of her mind. "Emily?" she said finally. My name is Emily." The words sounded uncertain, like a guess drawn from instinct rather than memory. Jack repeated the name quietly. "Emily. That's something." Her gaze shifted to Ranger, who had moved closer, resting his chin gently on the side of the couch. She reached out a trembling hand, brushing the fur along his neck. "He's beautiful," she murmured. "Ranger," Jack said. 8 years old, smartest partner I ever had." The dog closed his eyes, leaning slightly into her touch. Jack watched the scene unfold. Something about it felt right, like the forest itself approved. As night approached, Emily ate a little soup Jack had made, venison and wild herbs. She seemed calmer, though her mind still swam with uncertainty. At times she would pause mid-sentence, staring into the flames as if searching for fragments of a life she couldn't name. "I keep seeing lights," she said quietly at one point. "A city skyline. Voices calling my name and someone saying I have to run. But I don't know from what." Her voice broke. "It's like I'm hiding, but I don't know why." Jack's gaze softened. "Then you're safe hiding here," he said. "For now, that's all that matters." Ranger gave a low, approving huff, settling near the door again like a sentry. Later that night, as Jack sat by the window watching the moon rise over the ridge, he thought about how quickly life could twist. Yesterday, the forest had been silent and predictable. Today, it had delivered a stranger who looked at him like a lost daughter. He rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar ache of old ghosts. His real daughter, gone before she reached adulthood, taken by a drunk driver years ago. The pain had carved something out of him he thought would never heal. But when Emily had called him Dad, it had struck a place he'd buried deep. Behind him, Ranger shifted, letting out a soft growl at the sound of the wind outside. Jack glanced toward the couch. Emily was asleep again, her breathing slow and steady. He whispered to the dog, "Yeah, boy. We'll keep her safe. Whatever she's running from, it ends here for now." Outside, the moonlight fell through the pines, painting silver shadows across the forest floor. Somewhere in the distance, a lone coyote howled. Inside the small cabin, 3 lives, 1 man, 1 dog, and 1 broken woman, had found each other by chance, bound by wounds invisible to the world. And though none of them knew it yet, that fragile bond would soon be tested by the truths buried in the dark. Morning sunlight spilled gently through the pine branches, scattering gold across the forest floor. The air was cool, filled with the scent of resin and damp soil after another night of mountain mist. Montana's wilderness was both beautiful and merciless, its mornings cold enough to sting the lungs, its silence so complete it could swallow a man's thoughts whole. From the porch of the log cabin, Jack Coleman stood with his hands resting on the rail, watching the thin trail of smoke from his chimney rise into the clear sky. His once black hair, now streaked with gray, caught the light like weathered steel. His rugged face, marked by deep lines around the mouth and eyes, carried that same quiet endurance carved by years of solitude and loss. He had learned to live with ghosts, the war, the people he couldn't save, the wife and daughter who had died too soon. The cabin, the forest, and ranger were all he had left, and until recently, that had been enough. Inside, Emily sat near the fire, a wool shawl around her shoulders, eyes fixed on the dancing flames. Her recovery had been slow but steady. The cuts had healed, the bruises faded, though the deeper wounds, the ones inside her mind, still lingered like fog over a valley. Her long dark hair fell freely now, brushed smooth by Jack's old wooden comb. The firelight warmed her pale skin, softening the sharpness of confusion still haunting her expression. She had begun to move with more confidence around the cabin, helping with chores and speaking more each day, though her memories remained broken fragments, faces without names, places without meaning, a running sense of fear she couldn't place. Jack stepped inside, the door creaking behind him. Ranger followed at his heel, his thick fur glistening with morning dew. The German shepherd was strong and disciplined, his movements deliberate, every step silent but purposeful. Though he had the posture of a soldier, there was gentleness in him when he looked at Emily, an understanding that went beyond words. Whenever she stirred from uneasy sleep, Ranger would rise and lie closer, his steady breathing anchoring her through the night. "Fence is half down again," Jack said, setting his gloves on the table. "Deer keep getting through. I'll need a hand later if you're up for it." Emily turned, smiling faintly. "I'd like that. I owe you more help than I can give." "You don't owe me anything," Jack replied, his tone quiet but firm. "You're still healing." She shook her head, a stubborn spark glinting in her gray-green eyes. "Healing doesn't mean doing nothing. I need to feel useful." Jack studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, we'll start after breakfast." Hours later, under a pale blue sky, they worked side by side repairing the old wooden fence behind the cabin. The boards were weather-beaten, much like their owner. Jack swung the hammer with steady precision, while Emily held the posts in place, her hands trembling slightly from the cold. Her movements were clumsy at first, but Jack's patience never wavered. "You've done this before?" he asked with a half-smile. She laughed softly. "I don't think so. At least not that I can remember." "Well, you're learning quick," he said. By afternoon, they were both dusty and tired, sitting on the edge of the fence sharing a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried meat. Ranger lay at their feet, watching the tree line, ears flicking at distant sounds. "This place," Emily murmured, glancing toward the forest. "It feels safe, like nothing bad can reach us here." Jack followed her gaze. "It's the quiet that does it. Makes you think the world's gone still. But trouble's like weather. It always finds a way through." Her brow furrowed, as if something about his words triggered a memory. "I used to say that," she whispered, "about storms, to someone I cared about." She pressed her hands to her temples, closing her eyes. "God, why can't I remember?" Jack reached out, resting a rough hand on her shoulder. "Don't force it. Memories come when they're ready." Later that day, while Emily gathered kindling near the wreck site, Jack returned to the scorched remains of the helicopter. The wreckage still smelled faintly of burned metal. He crouched among the twisted pieces, searching for anything useful or dangerous that might have been missed before the last rain. That's when he saw it, half buried under charred pine needles, a small rectangle of metal glinting in the light. He brushed away the soot. It was a nameplate no larger than his thumb, engraved with fine letters. Emily Hartwell, CEO Hartwell Industries. Jack's pulse quickened. He knew that name. Months ago, before he retreated deeper into the woods, he'd heard it on the radio. News of a missing billionaire, head of one of the biggest tech conglomerates in the country. The world had been searching for her for weeks, and she was right here, sleeping in his cabin, mending fences like any ordinary soul. He turned the tag in his hands, the truth sinking in like ice. If she remembered, the media, the police, and the chaos would follow. She'd lose the peace she'd found here, and maybe the fragile sense of belonging she had begun to feel. He slid the tag into his pocket, the decision made before he'd even realized it. He would tell her nothing. Not yet. That evening, the forest dimmed to blue-gray, and the call of a distant owl echoed through the trees. Emily sat on the porch steps, wrapped in a blanket, Ranger beside her, his nose resting on her knee. Jack approached quietly, the tag still hidden deep in his coat pocket. "You look like you're remembering something," he said softly. She smiled faintly without looking at him. "Maybe pieces, dreams mostly. A tall building, a glass office, people calling my name. Hartwell, maybe? But then it fades. It's like trying to hold smoke." Jack's chest tightened, but his expression didn't change. "Dreams can lie sometimes," he said. "Don't trust them too much." She nodded slowly. "Sometimes I dream of a man, my father, I think. He used to hold my hand and say everything would be all right. But when I try to see his face..." She looked up at Jack, eyes glistening in the dusk. "It's you." The words hung between them, fragile and heavy. Jack looked away toward the horizon, where the last light of day faded behind the mountains. He wanted to tell her the truth, but something inside him stopped. Maybe she needed this illusion, or maybe he did. For now, silence was kinder. As the night wind rose, the forest seemed to whisper secrets neither of them could understand. Ranger shifted closer to Emily, pressing against her leg as if to remind her she wasn't alone. Jack sat beside them, the tag cold in his pocket, his mind tangled in guilt and wonder. The woman beside him had once ruled a world of steel and screens, yet now found peace in chopping wood and feeding a dog by the fire. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both felt it. That strange, unspoken bond between two broken lives slowly beginning to heal. The cold edge of autumn had deepened across the Montana wilderness. Frost clung to the pine needles each morning, and the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and damp earth. Jack Coleman stood by the porch of his cabin, scanning the ridge through a pair of old binoculars. His 55-year-old frame, broad and weather-toughened, was wrapped in a faded flannel jacket. Deep lines framed his eyes, carved by years of war and solitude. He had the look of a man who had long stopped expecting peace, and yet had found a quiet one here. Until now. Beside him, Ranger, his 8-year-old German shepherd, growled low, his sharp amber eyes fixed on something unseen beyond the trees. The dog's fur bristled along his spine. Jack set the binoculars down, his instincts tightening. Ranger was never wrong. "Easy, boy," he muttered, though his own pulse had begun to quicken. It wasn't the wild that made Ranger uneasy. It was people. Jack stepped off the porch, boots crunching against the frozen ground, and followed the dog's lead into the woods. The morning light slanted through the trees, cold and pale, painting everything in silver and shadow. After 10 minutes of moving silently through the brush, he saw them. 2 figures, dressed in dark outdoor gear, carrying cameras and long-range lenses. Reporters. He'd seen enough of them in his life to recognize the type. Behind them, a black SUV was parked awkwardly on a dirt trail, tires half buried in mud. The plates were from out of state. Jack's jaw tightened. He stepped into the open, his voice calm but firm. "Private land," he said. "You're trespassing." The younger of the two men, a tall, thin reporter with messy blonde hair and a camera slung over his shoulder, turned quickly. "Sir, we didn't mean to intrude. We're just following a lead. There's been talk that Emily Hartwell might be alive. Her helicopter went down somewhere near here." Jack's expression didn't change, though his stomach twisted at the name. "You won't find anyone by that name here. Best turn around." The other man, older, wearing a black windbreaker and the smugness of authority, stepped forward. "You live alone out here, don't you, Mr. Coleman? It's hard to believe someone could survive that crash without help." Jack's tone dropped an octave. "I said leave." Something in his voice made them step back. Ranger growled once, deep and warning. After a tense pause, the men retreated, muttering under their breath as they climbed into the SUV and drove off down the dirt road. Jack stood there until the sound of the engine faded completely, then looked down at Ranger. "They'll be back," he muttered. When he returned to the cabin, Emily was standing by the window, her arms folded, a frown shadowing her delicate face. She was wearing one of Jack's old plaid shirts, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her dark hair was tied loosely at the back, and though her body had regained its strength, her eyes still carried a faint vulnerability, like glass just repaired, but still fragile. "They were reporters, weren't they?" she asked quietly. Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. From the sound of it, they were looking for you." Emily turned away, pressing a hand to her temple. "I thought I could escape it, but it's catching up to me." Her voice trembled slightly. "I keep remembering things. Flashes, faces. There was another man in the helicopter, and a woman, my assistants. We were going somewhere, but..." She trailed off, her breathing quickening. "There was an explosion. I saw smoke inside the cabin. Someone had sabotaged the controls. I remember jumping." Jack stepped closer, his tone steady. "You don't have to force it." Her eyes met his, filled with fear. "No, Jack, you don't understand. Someone wanted me dead." Ranger whined softly, moving closer to her side, as if sensing the storm within her. Emily's fingers absently brushed the dog's head. "All this time, I thought I was running from shadows. But they're real, aren't they?" Jack nodded slowly. "Maybe. The world you came from, it's bigger and darker than this place. Out here I can protect you. Out there..." He let the thought hang. Tears welled in her eyes. "Then I should go, before they drag you into this. You've done enough." He shook his head. "Running won't stop it. If what you remember is true, you've got to face it. Clear your name. Find out who did this." She looked away, her voice breaking. "You don't know what that world is like, Jack. It chews people up. Everyone has a price." "I know exactly what it's like," he said quietly. "Only the battlefield changes." For a long moment, silence filled the cabin, broken only by the soft crackling of the fire. Emily turned back toward him, tears streaking her cheeks. "You saved me," she said. "You gave me peace. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a home again. When I looked at you, I saw..." Her voice faltered. "I saw the father I never really had." Jack's throat tightened. He looked away, pretending to busy himself with the kettle on the stove. "You don't owe me anything," he said gruffly. "You just needed time." "But you don't understand," she said, stepping closer. When I was a child, my father died in a car crash. I was 10. Since then, I've been surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Money, power, control. You didn't want anything. You just cared. Jack met her gaze, his weathered face softening. Maybe because I lost someone too. She nodded, tears still glistening. Then maybe we both found something we didn't expect. Outside, Ranger barked suddenly, sharp and loud. Jack moved to the window. Headlights flickered through the trees, more vehicles coming up the dirt road. It's them again, Jack muttered. Reporters, or worse. Emily's hand trembled as she grabbed her coat. I have to leave. He caught her wrist gently. No, not like this. You've spent too long running. If this is your fight, then you see it through, but on your terms. Her eyes met his, full of conflict, fear, and something else. Trust. Ranger stood between them, tail still, ears forward, ready. The approaching engines grew louder, cutting through the silence of the forest. Emily straightened her shoulders. All right, she said softly. No more running. Jack nodded once. That's my girl. In that fleeting moment, with the firelight casting their shadows against the cabin walls, there was no billionaire, no soldier, no hunted fugitive. Only a father and a daughter bound by something deeper than blood. Outside, the night gathered around them, cold and dark, as if the forest itself was holding its breath for what would come next. The first snow of winter came early that year, soft and slow, blanketing the Montana pines in silence. The forest that had once hidden Emily now shimmered under white light, peaceful but still heavy with the memory of what had happened. Jack Coleman stood outside his cabin, the breath from his lungs rising in mist, his old jacket buttoned to the neck. The lines on his weathered face seemed deeper today, but his blue-gray eyes carried a calm that hadn't been there a month ago. Inside, the fire still burned low, and Ranger, his loyal German shepherd, 8 years old and aging with grace, lay near the hearth, head resting on his paws. The dog had been uneasy for days, as if he sensed a change coming, the same way he could sense a storm before it broke. That morning, the sound of engines echoed faintly from the valley below. Ranger's ears twitched first. Then came the faint, rhythmic beat of helicopter blades cutting through the mountain air. Jack tensed, memories from the crash flashing in his mind, but the fear no longer held him the way it once did. He stepped forward as the noise grew louder, and moments later, 2 vehicles rolled to a stop by the tree line. A team of uniformed officers stepped out, snow crunching under their boots. Leading them was Sheriff Marcus Hale. Sometimes, the greatest miracles don't arrive with lightning or divine signs. They come quietly, in the form of second chances, unexpected kindness, and people who walk into our lives just when we've stopped believing in them. For Jack, it wasn't a flash of glory that saved him. It was love reborn in the heart of a stranger. A reminder that God's hand often works through ordinary people doing extraordinary acts of compassion. Emily's fall from the sky wasn't an accident. It was grace in disguise. In our own lives, maybe we all have our forests, places of loss, silence, or uncertainty. But if we keep faith, even the coldest winter can turn into a season of renewal. The Lord doesn't always remove the storm. Sometimes, He gives us someone to face it with. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment below. Tell us what miracle has quietly blessed your life. And if you believe that God still works in mysterious ways, click subscribe and join our community of faith and compassion. May the Lord bless you, guide your path, and fill your days with light, love, and gentle miracles, just like the one that found its way to Jack, Emily, and Ranger in the snowy woods of Montana. God bless you all.